we saw 85 homicides in 2017. So when you look and you break down those homicides, some of them were random, some of them were domestic. Alex and I spent a lot of time on them. A lot of them happen at night. But the homicides we've seen so far in 2018 have been domestic violence related. Did a lot of coffee and meet the cop type things, financial empowerment, educational empowerment, and we heard from the chief this week that they're going to be really doing that a lot in the Lakewood community, which has been hit hard by crime.
Accept the RNC in 2020, and interesting to see how a lot of the folks who voted against it publicly were not necessarily against it privately. Anybody want to start with that?
So I think LaWanna Mayfield gets the award for being on the same page and consistent through the entire summer. When you look back to early spring, when the mayor first promoted or brought up the idea of pursuing a bid for the RNC in 2020, there was a vote, 10-1, and LaWanna Mayfield was that one abstainer. But if you look at those minutes that Steve Harrison really just laid out really well from a closed session meeting earlier in the summer, I believe nobody really spoke up, namely Braxton Winston, who I think made a comment, came out with a Facebook video only a few weeks before that crucial 6-5 vote, but really didn't say anything. Justin Harlow, another one, really didn't say anything. It was only LaWanna Mayfield that laid out concerns about bringing the Trump administration's rhetoric here to Charlotte, how it would affect protesters, whether the $50 million, that federal grant for security, would be enough. And so Ed Driggs, the Republican, said that she laid all of that out really well.
He actually said it was an
But it's a welcoming schools program, which basically is a way, supposedly, according to the program, to make schools safer for LGBTQ students.
Giving teachers resources on how to, if they have an LGBT student, things that the teacher can do and help them in that process. And so parents saying that, using words like promiscuous, graphic, as far as their child having to have conversations that maybe the parent is not.
What did the group call it? Graphic, gender-bending, promiscuity, promoting sex education.
Just coming up in 2018, over 5 million square feet of office space just in Uptown. Something like 2,000 apartments and hundreds of hotel rooms. So we're going to see lots of hotels in Uptown. It's just an indication of all the growth. I think I saw something, 30,000 people live in Uptown Charlotte. That's a marked difference from people who grew up here would know that that wasn't the case about 15, 20 years ago. So we're in a cycle of a lot of growth. What's promising, though, is that you have companies not only planning this construction and a lot of buildings under construction, the office space is being leased as it's being planned. So we don't have a lot of just free office space that's not being used.
And they want that independent oversight group. So that was one thing that came out this week, and certain things, they want to make sure that money's used for, not mostly building new. They want to use it for naturally occurring
houses that are
housing.
already there, houses that could possibly be,
Also
which is a big deal. I know that, they're talking, and you might know about this, Dedrick, with the school system about Double Oaks, which wasn't that affordable housing back in the day?
Back in the day.
Double Oaks, but you talk about a place that's changed.
But now it's the school system, so they're talking about, I think the number is like $3 million for the city to get that back, and that was floated by Councilwoman LaWanna Mayfield.
They want to make sure the money's spent.
Do we think voters in November will say yes to it on the ballot?
Well, we were talking about bond issues and the history of bond referendums when it comes to Charlotte voters, and if you just look at the past election as any indication, we passed parks and school bonds pretty overwhelmingly, lots of money, but how much are we talking? They had a meeting about a week and a half ago. I know Dedrick was working the daytime, but they had a nighttime meeting with both CMS board and Matthews Town commissioners. The mayor and Mary McCray were sitting right beside each other, and was also almost kind of awkward to hear Mary McCray essentially saying, we've never heard that you all have any issues. We have never heard that you all have these problems. Why don't you all just call us? And it was almost kind of awkward to see that
have y'all not had this communication before? Where did this all come about? And it's important to point out, to Steve's point, is on the southern part of the extension, you've got that huge parking right at 485.
And you're right at 485.
Correct.
Where the line begins. That's not the
But
case on the
here,
extension.
you know, the last parking right is J.W. Clay.
Right.
And
that's a haul from 485 to
Correct.
where you have to drive to get to
well,
the
and that's
train.
not
So,
even
yeah.
where it ends. You know, the main station on that end is UNCC. I live in that part of town and have ridden and parked at that station. Parking is a challenge there because if you're a visitor, you're not a student, you're not a staff member. They have a parking deck, but it's full of students. So figuring out the parking and the parking decks, there are 4 of them on the northern end. 2 of them, most times when I ride through there, are completely empty. One thing that you will see, though, while those numbers will likely come up, you don't have the boost on Saturdays on the other days of the week. That you see that increase in ridership that you see on Saturday. You just don't have that on the other days of the week.
Yeah, and that's probably the UNCC factor for the Blue Line
Right.
extension.
I think there was a lot of public embarrassment riding on this for the city.
Right.
Because of the fact,
Potentially.
nationally, everyone knew that Charlotte and probably Las Vegas were the only 2 cities that actively wanted and were pursuing this RNC bid. And then we found out that Las Vegas really didn't even do a bid. And it was Charlotte on its own. So all of the work that was done over the summer, I think, and especially to the mayor's credit, really pushed this to make the city look more inclusive. And she was, I mean, looking at a lot of embarrassment riding on her if this vote, that federal grant vote didn't go through.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, spoke with the president of the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge. Their president expressed concern that he says he is hearing from officers about the workload, those officers that know what it was like working the DNC 12 to 16-hour days for about 2 weeks straight.
Yeah.
A lot of them not able to spend time with their families. And so with this RNC 2020, he expressed that he's hearing from officers that they're not looking forward to the workload. He also expressed for officers that have reached 25 years of service, veteran officers, they can retire. He says that a lot of them are, he's hearing that a lot of them are thinking of getting out, leaving the department
Before the event.
Before the event.